Are you confused about writing? Do you not know where to start or even how to finish? Do you love writing so much that it burns deep in your soul, but you still don't know how to meet your goals? Are you looking for a little inspiration that will take you on a writer's vacation? Then let us all write together. Let us all write our way. Hello everyone, welcome to Write Our Way. I'm your host Patrick Starks, and today we're going to talk about world building. I thought this would be a good topic to talk about because I've had this conversation with a few people before who they have these incredible characters, they have these great ideas of what they have for like a comic book or an animation, but they don't know how to quite build out the world. They don't know how to quite connect the dots. And the first thing I tell them is you got to ask yourself, why does this world exist in the first place? What is the meaning behind the world that's being created? This, my friends, is very essential to your storytelling, your story in general, because if you have no meaning behind your world, then it, in a lot of ways, makes the story very broad, which can lead a lot of your readers astray and kind of like be off-putting when they're reading the book. If any of you guys are like gamers like myself, then it's kind of like when you pick up a game like the most recent game I just picked up is Horizon the Forbidden West, and you look at the map and you're just overwhelmed by it. You're just like, geez, this world is huge. But what makes the world so attractive is the meaning behind the story and all the characters and all the enemies that tie it all into play. And that, for the most part, is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how we can make this world attractive. And so, we've already covered the first step, right? Which is finding the meaning behind why this world exists in the first place. We need to think about the era. Is it the modern times or is it the olden times? That's even a word. Once we've determined the era, then we can focus more on the driving factors, which are going to be your protagonists and your antagonists. How the two react to the world that you build is going to be really what brings out the attractiveness of the story. What I want you to do is kind of brainstorm with me here. Bring out a piece of paper and pen and really think about, how does the protagonist fit in this world? And everyone's answer is going to be different depending on what you're going for. But the point is, we need to figure out how they fit in the world so we can determine why they themselves even exist. And the same will be vice versa for the antagonists. And this is the tricky part. This is the part that I figured out after a few years of, writing stories and really being an avid reader. What I found to really make this pop was having a similarity between the protagonist and the antagonist. And what I mean by that is, whatever is going on in their world, they have to be somewhat conflicting with one another. On the contrary, they're both greatly needed, ironically. How's that saying go again? One man's trash is another man's treasure or pleasure, or however that goes. And it's practically the same concept when we think about how our protagonists and antagonists interact within the world that they're in. They both have these issues that are going on that conflict with one another, but it's not to say either one's better than the other. And I'll tell you the reason I love this is because this really shows this like humanity within your characters, right? So many times in life, we all are so fixated in our own stories that we don't realize the stories that are going on in other people's lives. We don't understand, or sometimes not even care to understand, why certain people act the way they do. Not giving them an excuse, but it's to say that the protagonist and the antagonist have their own story that they're going through within the same story, if that makes any sense. Basically, like us as human beings, this world that we live in is one big book, but within the book, we have multiple side quests, multiple pathways, multiple stories of our own that we have to partake in. And I believe that's one of the reasons why when I talk to people about world building, it's so overwhelming and it's confusing, because you have to get yourself away from a place where you're thinking about your story and thinking about multiple people's story. Only then will your characters begin to come alive, and only then will your story begin to have this realness to it, this naturalness. But oh, my friends, we are not done yet. We are just getting started, because now that we're thinking about this whole thing of multiple stories, each person's story is going to influence another's story. And what I'm getting at is, this is when our sub-characters come into play. Or should I say supporting characters. Either way, these characters are going to help aid our protagonists and antagonists of the success of what they're trying to achieve. Now, again, like in real life, some of these are going to be family members. Some of these can be actual friends. Some of these can be just acquaintances. People just passing by. People that they meet once and never see again. But either way, they're going to have some significant influence on where your protagonist or antagonist goes, what pathway they decide to take, what things they decide to bring along with them that they feel they might need in order to be successful in their journey, what skills they might need to pick up in order to see that they are more successful than the other. Now, I will say that for those of you who don't have an antagonist as an actual being or character, it could just be like, you know how you have some of those stories where it's just a tornado or it's like weather or something like that. It's kind of like, that's a different scenario, which I'm going to talk about here in a bit. But for right now, we're just talking about the protagonist and the antagonist as characters. But please just hold tight. We're going to also follow up on the antagonist part where they're not a character. But yeah, just going back to the world building and staying on topic of that, you know, with our supporting characters, like I've always said, they need to be just as important as the protagonists and the antagonists, which means that they too need to have a reason of why they're in this world and how they feel towards it. What are they doing to sway the meaning of the world that is being built, or the world that you have built? And the reason, everyone, this is so important is because, like in life, everything has purpose, everything has a meaning. And when you have things in your story that are just there for no reason, and they have no purpose being there, or they just have no reason of meaning, I guess I would say it like that, it just doesn't feel right. And you lose your readers because they're just like, this is like a Transformers movie. We're just throwing in random characters and watching a bunch of, crazy drama go down. But we have no idea why these people are here. They're just all at each other's heads. And that doesn't work when we're talking about storytelling and world building. Each character needs to have a meaning so your audience can be not just connected and so fixated on the protagonist and the antagonist. Again, guys, it's like acting. An actor is only as good as his supporting cast. They can't just carry the torch the whole movie. And the same thing goes with stories. The protagonist and the antagonist, I don't care how good you create them, they can't carry the whole story. You gotta have other compelling characters that help them move the story towards a direction you want it to be led. At the same breath, lead it in a way where you're getting your point across to your audience and what you want them to know, whether that be a moral meaning or just something that It's entertaining. And let me be clear, the only time this ever works is if you're doing something like an I Am Legend movie, something where it's just one character and they're alone in this like apocalyptic world and they're trying to survive and they're trying to figure out things. They have to go through all this like trauma and loss all on their own. And it's so much more different when you're doing it intentionally, but when you're doing it involuntarily for a story that's built around a whole bunch of characters, man, that's really cringy. It can be very cringy. So I'm not saying that you can't do a story like that. Just make sure your intentions are right behind it. Like, make sure that's what you intended on doing if you're going to do that. If not, then be careful with that, because again, it confuses the reader because they're trying to figure out, okay, is this story just about this person? I mean, essentially, when we write our stories, it is surrounded around one person, but they, again, have other supporting members that are a part of their story, too, that help guide the way. But if it's going to be a story like I Am Legend, then you really don't need it. Which this kind of leads me to what I was going to talk to you guys about when you have an antagonist that isn't an actual character. And the reason this kind of led me to this is because when I was thinking about, just one character carrying the torch, the whole story, like a whole I Am Legend thing, it's like the only things that they're interacting with is the environment at that point. Their environment is essentially their supporting driving factor. And so just going back to what I promised you guys about with the antagonist that isn't a character, that's kind of essentially how the protagonist is going to act towards the antagonist, if you're still following me. So the protagonist is going to react to the antagonist based on the events that are playing around in the world. So it's beyond just a character now. It's so much bigger. It's going to be actually events that are happening that are making them a bit, depending on what you're writing, it can either make them a bit eager, afraid, excited. It can be multiple emotions, but either way, there's going to be a lot of things that drive them instead of just that one character. And so most importantly, I would say when you're thinking about this, really think about what the antagonist is going to be. Is it going to be a character or is it going to be a series of events? And let me just clarify. So if it is going to be a series of events, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're no longer going to have supporting characters. I mean, you're always going to have that one character that's going to play kind of the devil's advocate. There could be a series of events going on, but there could still be a supporting character that kind of enables the events to happen even more, to occur more. And the protagonist now has to deal with them in order to basically put an end to the events that are going down. But it's not to say that that person is the main antagonist. I think a lot of the things that get mixed up is, oh, this is the antagonist of the story. Not necessarily. This is just the person that's somewhat for the ride. They see the series of events and they want them to play out. They were never the ones that created the events. The events created themselves. And so they want to see the ride fully play out. And for that very reason, they're doing anything they can to make sure that the protagonist doesn't stop the ride. And so now that we have addressed these points, the biggest part to all of this is addressing the conclusion. And the conclusion is one of my favorite parts, is because the conclusion kind of gives the morale of the story, the reason why the story was even told from the get-go. I mean, although we might know the reason behind why we created this world, we need to know at the end of the story, what is the lesson being taught? And I used to believe that certain stories only told a moral or gave a moral compass to what was going on. But even in your most entertaining stories, there's a reason behind why the story is being told the way it's being told and what message is trying to be conveyed through it. I mean, when we watch some of the Fast and the Furious movies, I mean, we've seen tons of Fast and the Furious movies, but what's it always about? Family, right? And that's kind of what I want you guys to think about when you're building this world and connecting all the dots. What does it all really mean at the end of the day? Most importantly, why should it even matter to most people? Why should people even care about the message? And just going back to the thing about what I was talking about with comic books, that's kind of the message that gets pushed out with comic books is this heroism. People want to see this heroism because, in a sense, they want to be the heroes themselves of their lives. And it's good to see somebody go through the same struggles they do, yet triumph and persevere through it somehow. Which is exactly how most of the Fast and the Furious movies are. You have all this struggle and all these challenges and all these enemies Dom faces, right? But at the end of the day, he's able to persevere and save his family. And that's what a lot of people relate to today, because people want to protect their family. They want to make sure their family is well taken care of. And so that is the message that's being portrayed through Fast and the Furious. Is like, do what all means necessary. Do what you need to do to make sure your family is taken care of and that they're okay. And a lot of times people like to see that because they feel that. They feel like they're being this hero vicariously through Dom. But for most of us writers, this shouldn't be new, right? We see this through sports all the time. How fans, they live vicariously through their favorite athletes. And so when I'm telling or teaching people about writing stories, I think that gets overlooked a lot of times because they don't necessarily put two and two together. When they think about stories, they're thinking about just this book filled with paper versus an actual live person. But essentially both are the same and both are being introduced in the same manner. So before I wrap this episode up, what I really want you guys to take away from this is, really think about the in-depthness of your character and how they connect to everyday people. And more so, study, do your homework, study how fans react to athletes. Think about their connection and why they're so connected to their favorite athletes and what it means. Maybe even interview some people that you might know that are hardcore basketball fans or football fans and really ask them, like, why do they love their favorite athletes so much? Think about why everyone loves Ronaldo. Is it really because he's just a great soccer player, or is it because of how he carries himself? And you'll be surprised the answers you get. The thing I want you guys to understand about writing is writing isn't just, punching words on the paper or whatnot, or even about just reading. It's really about understanding the mindset of how we think as human beings and the reason to why we connect to certain things, because not everybody connects to the same thing. Everyone's different. And so in order to really be successful at your writing, you have to understand the differences of people and how they connect and what makes them tick. And I'm not talking about some of that stuff they do with social media and how they take people's data and what they like, and take advantage of it. I'm talking like seriously understanding the beauty of the human mind and why stories have been told for so many centuries. Because when you have that, you can get a better understanding of what your story needs to be, and more importantly, what it has to be for you and how you connect through it to your audience. But you guys got this. I always know you guys have it, and I love having these conversations with you guys. And just keep up the hard work. Don't give up on your writing. Writing is a long haul. It's like stocks, like the stock market. It's either you're in it for the long haul or you're not. If you're not in for the long haul, then you're just never going to see the results. So stick with it. Don't give up. Keep reading. And yeah, just be experimental and steady. Have fun with it, But I'm not gonna hold any more of you guys this time. I think we covered the basis of world building, but you guys know it. Stay tuned for the next episode. I'm gonna say it. Become a child again. Imagine, my friends. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast to keep up to date on the newest episodes. And as always, keep writing and see everyone soon. Take care.